Jerry Agar for Ezra Levant. When tragedy strikes, we react emotionally, which is understandable and appropriate. But if politicians react emotionally with legislation, we get bad law. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard by now that Prince William and Kate Middleton are expecting their first child, a future monarch. The news of the royal fetus, which immediately received its own parody Twitter account, broke as the Duchess was admitted to hospital with a very severe type of morning sickness. What has followed has been a predictable series of events that had a completely unforeseeable outcome. Two Australian DJs prank called King Edward VII Hospital in London, pretending to be Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles, calling to check up on Kate's condition. The accents were atrocious and over the top. In the background, they made dog barking sounds and referenced feeding the corgis. What they expected would end in the sound of the phone being slammed down took an unexpected turn when the nurse on the other end of the phone put the call through to the ward, where another unsuspecting nurse gave personal details about Kate's condition to the not-so-royal imposters. The call went viral. Media outlets around the world played the recording. People who thought it was funny laughed. People who thought it was tacky and inappropriate complained. It was the reaction most prank calls get. What made this prank call very different, though, was that one of the victims reacted in a tragic and an unforeseeable way. Reports came down Friday morning that the nurse who transferred the call, not the one who gave the information out, was found dead, the result of a suicide. Jacinta Saldana, a married mother of two, took her life. Speculation being that it was over embarrassment for being duped by the prank call. Anytime someone ends their own life, it's a tragic circumstance. For someone to be so convinced that their troubles are so insurmountable that the only way to escape the weight of them is to end their own life is terrible. It's tragic. But those who are blaming the DJs are wrong to assign blame to them. The DJs made a by-the-numbers, predictable prank phone call. They were surprised that hundreds hadn't called before they did. The death of this poor nurse was not a foreseeable outcome, not at all. Was it a stupid prank? Yeah. That's what some DJs do. Would people be so upset and demanding the DJs be fired had the suicide not occurred? Well, we know the answer to that is no. It was only after the fact that sponsors have pulled their advertisements and the DJs went off the air. In the wake of the tragedy, we now have the predictable chorus of complaints and proposed solutions. Prank calls should be banned. The DJs should be charged with homicide. Something has to be done. For the record, I don't do calls like that on the radio. I don't see the entertainment value or morality of making fun of people who didn't ask to play the game and don't even know they're playing. I try to stick to sticking it to politicians. That said, we need to do nothing in the wake of what happened. We need to stop reacting to every unusual tragedy with a call to change behaviors that under normal circumstances would not have had a negative result. When U.S. Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot in the head at an Arizona grocery store, there was immediately a call to cool political rhetoric. Some believed heated right-wing criticism of Democrats was responsible. This was before any of the facts or motive was known. She wasn't shot by rhetoric, and if political expression was causing people to shoot politicians, there'd be no politicians left. She was shot, along with 18 other people, 6 of whom died, by a man who was obsessed with her. This case was an aberration. Americans didn't need to change their politics in the wake of the shooting. When a madman opened fire at a midnight screening of the new Batman movie this year, there was immediately calls made to make changes. People shouldn't be allowed to wear masks to movies. Why were there children at the theater for a midnight screening? And none of that had anything to do with a madman walking into the theater and shooting it up. We know drinking and driving predictably leads to many crashes. People are killed. We banned drinking and driving. Have you ever heard of a prank phone call leading to someone's death? Ever? When you first heard the call, did you think, boy, I hope nobody on the call takes their own life? I didn't. Never crossed my mind. As a people, we always look for ways to avoid another tragedy. And that makes sense. But that only works if the tragedy was caused by a predictable series of events. Too often, we're trying to prevent the latest crisis after the fact. The long gun registry was pushed forward by groups such as the Students of Polytechnique and the Victims of Polytechnique, channeling the understandable emotion of the horror of that school shooting that killed 14 women and injured 10 other women and 4 men. The problem is that the registry was a failed policy that ballooned in cost and was only supportable as useful in theory. The RCMP admitted the information was incomplete and inaccurate to some undetermined level. Even Justin Trudeau called it a failed policy in one of his many positions on the registry over the past few days. But of course, the Quebec government took the occasion of the anniversary of the Polytechnique shootings to introduce legislation on domestic violence, which Polytechnique wasn't, and provincial long gun registry, which is unlikely to be any more successful than the federal one was. Reason over emotion is always the best policy in law. Allowing politicians to appear helpful and concerned while ignoring reason and common sense merely perpetuates an expensive sham. Meanwhile, we're in danger of overreacting in law to the real issue and concern of bullying. Stay tuned at the end of the show for more on that in my closing Agarment.